So mostly if they wanted a mirror, what they would do is get metal and polish it really, really nice, and they could use that as a mirror. Obviously, it's not as good as this, but that was still expensive. So mirrors were actually a very luxury item. I don't want to break this. That would not be good. All right, that'd be bad doing that. Mirrors were a luxury item at this time. Really, really nice. So it's very interesting that James uses this because I think a lot of people at that time didn't see the reflection a whole bunch because they weren't mirrors. So for sure they were going to remember what they looked like when they saw themselves in the mirror. They were going to concentrate on what they looked like because they probably didn't see themselves other than maybe seeing themselves in a reflection of water in a water or something like that. So it's really interesting that he uses that word as an analogy. So in John chapter 23 to 25, James says this: "Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like someone looking at his own face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and immediately forgets what kind of person he was." Some of your versions might say, "Forget what he looks like." This is what mine says. Forgets what kind of person he was. But the one who looks intently into the perfect law of freedom and preserves in it is not forgetful hearer, but a doer of works. This person will be blessed in what he does. There's a couple of things that James says here, and I like what he says in verse 22. He says, "Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." And I like what he says in verse 22. How are we deceiving ourselves if we're hearers and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves? And I like what he says. How do we deceive ourselves? How are we deceiving ourselves if we're hearers and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves? We deceive ourselves because we think our faith is more than it really is. Right? Absolutely, we do that. Oh, I go to church. We all know those people, right? I go to church, and our faith is more. I'm a Christian. All right. What do you do? What does your life look like outside? I go to church. We all know those people, right? I go to church, and I'm a Christian. I pray before meals. What does your life look like outside? I've had that before. I pray before meals. I pray before meals. I sometimes read the Bible. I've had that before. What does our life look like outside church? So that's one of the ways we are deceiving ourselves sometimes when we're hearers and not doers. So that's one of the ways we are deceiving ourselves. What does a doer of the word look like in your opinion? When we're hearers and not doers. So that's a good way. What does a doer of the word look like in your opinion? Absolutely. Someone that walks the walk and doesn't just talk the talk. Absolutely. You know, when one of the reasons why this is a really cool analogy, I'm not going to pick up this heavy mirror because I'm afraid of going to break it. But one of the reasons this is a cool analogy is because of the kind of absurdity of us looking into a mirror and forgetting what we look like. But one of the reasons this is a cool analogy is because unless we have some sort of mental thing going on, we know what we look like. We're not going to forget what we look like. But the reason why James uses this as an example is because of that absurdity. Because what kind of person forgets what he looks like right after he looks at himself in the mirror? What kind of, because he would have to have short-term memory loss, something would have to be going on. He would have a very shallow memory. Very shallow memory. Well, what kind of faith is it where we're just hearers and not doers? What kind of faith is that? What's the kind of faith is it where we call ourselves Christians? What kind of faith is that? And we can come to church, and we should do those things, right? But if that's all we do, and that's our whole Christian walk is just come to church, and our life looks no different than a non-church goer outside of church. Whole Christian walk is just come to church, and our life looks nothing. Are we just being hearers than a non-church goer outside of church? Are we just being hearers of that word? Are we just being hearers than a? That's what the absurdity that James is talking about. It's absurd to be a Christian not do things with that faith.
That's what the absurdity that James is talking.
That's not how it works. Like you're supposed to be a Christian. Obviously, works doesn't save you, but your faith will propel you, and is evidence of those. Is evidence of your faith. Those works are evidence of your faith. Just like fruit is the evidence of a fruit tree. Works is the evidence of the underlying faith. Just like fruit is the evidence. It's like in the Old Testament where it says that Abraham had faith and it was credited to him as righteousness. Before he did all that stuff, his faith was credited to him as righteousness, and then he did all those good works. Before he did all that stuff. So that's why this is such an important. That's why this is such an important idea that James is trying to convey here. But there's five different. There's five different ways, four different ways actually. No, five different ways. I missed. But there's five different ways that people respond to looking at themselves in the mirror. There's five different. I can't sit down. Five different ways. There's five different ways. And I got this from a guy named Brian Nupperfor, but he's really awesome. He's a pastor in North Carolina, but he says there's five different ways. He says the first person who responds he's Mr. Blind. Right? He says he looks at himself in the mirror. We use this as a mirror. It's a lot like that. He looks at himself in the mirror, but he cannot see his imperfections. He looks at himself in the mirror. We use this as a mirror. It's a lot like that. He can't see the wrongness in the mirror. But he cannot see his imperfections. He looks at himself in the mirror, but he can't. He can't see the wrongness. A lot of times we'll say bad things are good and good things are bad. He can't see the wrongness. A lot of times we'll call evil good, bad and good evil. And how much does that apply on our daily life, in our culture right now? People call evil good. How many we open up our phones and look at the news? How much does that apply? Scroll through Facebook or watch news on TV, and there are literally people saying we open up our phones 2 plus 2 is 5. How much does that apply? Scroll through Facebook or watch news on TV, and if you think it's 4, it's because something's wrong with you. 2 plus 2 is 5. How much does that apply? Scroll through Facebook. You're being bigoted, and if you because you think 2 plus 2 is because something's wrong with you. 2 plus 2 is 5. That's an example of someone who's blind, who's totally bought in to what the culture says a life should look like, especially our modern culture. So the first is Mr. Blind. The second kind of person is Mr. Afraid or Mr. Scared. He sees the blemishes on his face, right? Mr. Blind. The second kind of person is Mr. Afraid or Mr. Scared. He sees too afraid to address on his face, right? Mr. Blind. The second kind of person. I think that's a lot of people. I think. He sees too afraid to address on his face, right? Mr. Blind. It's kind of like it's the equivalent of a guy or someone who knows that they're sick or that they're probably sick, but they don't want to go to their doctor because they're afraid to figure out. It's the equivalent of a guy or someone who knows that they're sick or that they're probably sick, but they don't want to go to their doctor. I had a toothache one time, and I didn't want to go to the dentist. It's the equivalent of a guy or someone who knows. I knew I had something wrong with my tooth. I was afraid I would have to get I've come from a family that had teeth. So I was afraid I would have to get a crown or something. So I put off going to the dentist for a while. I knew I had teeth. So I was afraid I would have to get a crown or something. So Mr. Blind and Mr. Afraid. The third kind of guy is Mr. Self-Righteous. Mr. Self-Righteous. Blind and Mr. He looks at his face in the mirror. Mr. Self-Righteous. And notices the spots. He notices some spots. He looks at his face in the mirror, but he does not do anything about his face. He thinks those spots are amazing. There's nothing wrong with him. He does not. He sees your spots. He thinks those spots are amazing, but he doesn't see his spots. He will call out your spots. But he won't call out his spots. He thinks those spots are amazing, but he doesn't see his spots. He will call out your spots. Mr. Self-Righteous, but he won't call out his. The fourth person is Mr. Doubt. Mr. Doubt. He knows he has spots on his face. The fourth person, but he thinks he cannot get rid of them. Mr. Doubt. He knows he has spots on his face. He looks at himself in the mirror and he knows he has sin in his life. Mr. Doubt.
Mr. Doubt.
He knows he's not being a doer of the word,
He looks at himself in the mirror and he knows
but he's afraid of what his life might look like if he actually tries to be
a doer of the
what
word.
things he will have to give up, what things he'll have to do, what sins he'll have to confess, what things he will have to give up. He doubts he can ever get to the point where he can be a doer of the word and actually remember what he looks like. He can ever get to the point where he can be a doubt can be a powerful thing in our lives. Absolutely. It could be a powerful thing in our lives. Now I think that's something that we as a church, we as mature believers, I know a lot of you guys have been believers for decades and decades longer than I've been alive, maybe. We as mature believers, that's something that a lot of you guys have been believers who have been believers for most of our lives. We can struggle with that. But also younger people or younger Christians, those of our age, most of our lives, we can struggle with that. You know, that is something as a youth pastor, and I deal with young people all the time. That is one of the main things I deal with is young people, young Christians doubting their faith. Because you know what? They go to school. I don't care if you go to private school. I mean, I grew up, I've gone to all private schools my every level of education. They go to school, private high school, college, graduate school. I've gone to all private schools my every level of education. It doesn't matter where you go. Private high school, college. You're going to come in contact with people who are going to make you doubt your faith. It doesn't matter where. They're going to say things to you. They're going to, hey, what is this? And this inconsistency in the Bible right here. What's your answer to that? They're going to say things to you. Believe that God created the world in 6 days? In the Bible right here. Do you really believe? Do you really believe that King David was a real person? Do you really believe? Do you really believe that? Oh, come on, man. There are a ton of religions. All of them are wrong except yours. Do you really believe? Do you really believe that? How can God create the world? Who created God? All of them are wrong except yours. But that is something I deal with. How can God create the world? Who created God? All of them are wrong except yours. So doubt is powerful. I deal with. How can God create and it's okay to ask questions about you. That's how we learn. Doubt is powerful, right? It's okay if we don't know the answer to, that inconsistency, that random inconsistency in the Old Testament that someone points to. It's okay if we don't know. We can find out that answer because there is an inconsistency. That random inconsistency. 99% of inconsistencies that people state in the Bible can be explained in 2 sentences. That random inconsistency. The other 1% needs a little bit more explanation. But they're not hard. So doubt could be powerful. But, so these 4 people, all right, Mr. Blind, Mr. Afraid, Mr. Pride, Mr. Doubt. These are all bad things. These are all things that people who are just hearers the word, not doers, Mr. Pride, Mr. Doubt, respond. These are all bad things. The 5th person is Mr. Wisdom, Mr. Wisdom, Mr. Wise, respond. These are all bad. He sees the spots on his face, Mr. Wisdom, Mr. Wisdom, Mr. Wise, and he tries to correct them. He sees the spots on his face, Mr. Wisdom, Mr. Wisdom. He prays to God. He seeks forgiveness from the Almighty. He seeks not to sin. He prays to God to become more like Christ. Now you notice what I say, the Mr. Wise, he acknowledges the spots on his face. Become more like Christ. He doesn't, just because there's spots on his face doesn't mean he's not wise. The spots on his face. The wisest man in the world, who ever lived, Solomon, messed up a lot. Spots on his face doesn't mean he's not wise. But the wisest man in the world, what makes a person wise, what makes a believer wise, is someone who can analyze their life and the sin in their life, and knowing that they need to improve. Is someone who can analyze their life and the sin in their life. No, not passing the buck spiritually. Oh, I'm spiritually immature because of this person. I'm spiritually immature because I cannot read very well, which means I can't read spiritually immature because of this person. They internalize because I cannot read very well. They internalize those many sins in their lives, doubts in their life, pride in their life, and they say that they need to do better. And they need to seek forgiveness from God. They need to do better. And they need to, So these are five different people that react to being hearers and doers of the word. When they look at themselves in the mirror, this is how they react. Okay, Ethan, what are you saying? All right, what does it mean to be a doer of the word? What does it mean to be a hearer of the word? Well, what's cool about the Bible is it's not just random people writing verses that are not connected to one another. James gives us what a hearer and a doer of the word is in the paragraphs before this analogy, simile, or metaphor, whatever it's called. He does that starting all the way back. And we'll read a lot of scripture here, but it's important. All right, so start all the way back in James chapter 1, a few verses back, verses 5. All right, so what does a hearer do? What does just a hearer do? A hearer doubts. Right now, if you see that in verse 5. Now, if anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly. Ask God, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting. For a doubter is like a surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all his ways. So a hearer doubts. Being double-minded, doer seeks more wisdom from God. A hearer doubts. That doubter, that hearer is like a wave tossed in the ocean. It's that doubter, nothing. A second. It's like a wave tossed in the ocean. Kind of reminds me of what looking in the mirror and forgetting what you look like a little bit. It's like a wave tossed in the ocean. So the hearer doubts, looking in the mirror. The doer asks for wisdom. And this is one of the few passages that directly says that God will give you something. Looking in the mirror. Too. Like he says he doesn't say he may give you something. If you seek God and ask God for more wisdom, he will give it to you. He doesn't say he may give you something. If you seek God and ask God to help you grow closer to Him, without doubt, He will answer that prayer. And ask God to help you grow. It might not be in a way that we think. Without doubt, it might not be in a way that we want something. But that's something that He will do. All right, we see that. Okay, a hearer of the word, doubt, a doer asks for wisdom or seeks wisdom. The next part, verse 9. This is another one. Okay. Let the brother in humble circumstances boast in his exaltation. The next part, verse 9. In the Greek, that word, let the brother in humble circumstances. I can't pronounce the word because I'm not very good at pronouncing, but it means high place. In the Greek, I like that word. So let the humble brother who is in humble circumstances boast in his high place. I like that word. So let the humble brother, but let the rich boast in his humiliation, because he will pass away like the flower of the field. For the sun rises, but let the rich boast rises, and together with a scorching wind dries up the grass, and the flower falls off. The sun rises, and its beautiful appearance perishes. In the same way, the rich will wither away while pursuing his activity. And its beautiful appearance perishes. Here, the same way, in this analogy right here, is a rich person. Is a rich person who's consumed with his activities, like it says in verse 15. Excuse me, like it says in verse 12, 11. It says in verse 11. Excuse me, like it says. But a doer is a person who is humble, but still, but a doer exalts is a person his exaltation, his high place. But still, is this saying right here that a rich person can't go to heaven, or a rich person can't be a doer of the word? Absolutely not. Is this saying, but a doer of the word is humble, even if he is in a meager financial state or a meager place of life. Of the word is humble, even if he is in a meager financial state or a meager only place boast in his wealth. and is not humble.
even if he is.
All right, so
And
that's
a
another
hearer,
way. A hearer boasts in
only,
his high place,
boasts in
and a
his
rich
wealth,
person
is not humble.
withers away. In
All
this
right, so
analogy,
that's
the next one
another way.
is down in
Here,
verse 12.
boast in his high
Um,
place.
Blessed
and,
is the
rich
one who
person,
endures trials, because
withers
when
away.
he has
All right,
stood
now,
the
next
test,
one
he will
is down in verse
receive
12.
the
Boast in his
crown
high
of life.
place,
Blessed
and,
is the one who
that
God
endures
has
trials,
promised
because
to
when
those
he has
who love
stood
him.
the test,
No
he will
one
receive
undergoing a
the
trial should
crown
say,
of
I am
life.
being tempted by
Blessed is the
God,
one who
since
endures
God is
trials,
not
because
tempted
when
those
he has
who love him.
stood
He himself
the
doesn't
test,
tempt
no
anyone,
one
but
undergoing
each
a
person
trial
is
should say,
tempted
I
when
am
he is
being
drawn
tempted by God,
away
since
and
God is
enticed
not
by
tempted
his
by
own
evil.
evil
He
desires.
himself doesn't tempt anyone.
Then after
but
that
each
desire is
person
conceived,
say,
it
I
gives
am
birth to
drawn
sin.
away
And when
and
sin is
enticed by
fully grown,
his
it gives
own
birth
evil. He
to
himself doesn't
death.
tempt anyone.
Then after
but
that
each
desire is
person
conceived,
say,
it
I
gives
am
birth.
drawn
Don't be deceived, my
away.
dear
And
brothers
when
and
sin is
sisters.
fully
Every
grown,
good
it gives
person
birth
and
to
perfect gift is from
Then
above.
after that desire is
Coming
conceived,
down
it
from the
gives birth
Father
to
of
sin.
lights,
When
my dear
sin
brothers and
is
sisters,
fully
Father of
grown,
lights,
it gives
who
birth
does not
to
change
perfect
like the
gift from
shifting
above.
shadows. By his own
Coming
choice,
down
he
from
gave
the
us
Father
birth
of lights,
by the
my
word
dear
of
brothers
truth,
and sisters, Father of lights,
so that he would
who
be a
does not change
kind
like the
of
shifting
first fruits
shadows.
of his
By
creatures.
his own choice, he gave us birth by the word of truth.
A
So that he
doer
would be a kind
endures
like the
trials.
first fruits of his creatures.
Man,
His own choice, he
an
gave us
endurer
birth by the word of
endures
truth.
trials.
A doer
And a
endures
hearer
trials.
is drawn away by their desires.
Man, his own choice, he
An
gave us
endurer
birth by the word of
endures.
truth.
I think we've done
And a
both of those
hearer
if
is
we've
drawn
been
away
a
by
follower
their
of Christ for more than
desires.
2 seconds.
An endurer
I think we
endures-
have been drawn
I think
away by our
we've
own
done
desires.
both of those if we're followers.
Absolutely.
Been
When
a
I was in
follower of
college,
Christ
I
for more
wanted to
than
be
2
an
seconds.
accountant.
I think
That was my
we
desire.
have
I don't
been
know
drawn away
why.
by
I
our
thought I
own
could make a
desires.
lot of money.
Absolutely.
Being
When
a
I was
hot
in
shot
college, I
accountant.
wanted to be an accountant. I think that was my desire.
My father undergrad was in
Absolutely.
accounting.
When I
My
was in
sister's
college,
undergrad
I
was in
wanted
accounting.
to
My
be
brother's
an
undergrad was
accountant.
in accounting. It was
I
kind
think
of a
that was
family
my
thing.
desire.
And I wanted to do that. That was my desire.
My sister's undergrad was in
Right?
accounting. My brother's undergrad was in
But in
accounting.
that circumstance, I was being a hero of the
And I
word.
wanted
I
to
knew
do that.
God
That
was
was my
leading
desire.
me to go into
But
ministry.
in that circumstance, I was
And he
being a
made it
hero of the word.
abundantly
I knew
clear in
God
a
was
couple
my
ways.
desire.
One, I'm not great at math.
But in that circumstance, I was being
So
made it
if you're majoring in
abundantly clear
accounting
in a couple ways.
in college,
One,
maybe
great at math.
get more than C's in math in
So
college,
if you're majoring in accounting
and not put off all your
college,
accounting classes till your last
maybe
year,
get more than C's in math.
and changing your
not
major.
put off all your accounting classes till your last year. Get more
Don't
than
do that. He
and
made it abundantly clear. He didn't give you that
changing
skill
your
set.
all your accounting classes till your last year.
And he didn't give me the desire to do it. I was just kind of doing it because that's what I thought I should do. I knew I wanted to make a lot of money.
And he didn't give me
So
the
when
desire
ministry,
to do it.
obviously,
I was just kind of
there's
doing
tons.
it because that's what I thought I should do.
But
I knew I wanted to make a lot of money.
that was my
He didn't give me the
desire.
desire to do it.
Oh, man, I
I was
wanted,
just kind of
there's
doing
tons.
it because
I
that's
wanted
what
to make
I
all
thought
that
I
money.
should do. I
But
wanted to make a lot of money.
I was
That
being
was
a
my
hearer of the
desire.
word.
Yeah,
And it took about 6-7 months after college when I was working this job at a storage company. And after getting yelled at by customers for not giving them a break on their storage unit, that God really broke me. And getting yelled at by customers in October night, I remember that. And God was saying, no, all right,
God really
Ethan,
broke me.
stop playing around. You're going in the ministry. And God was saying, no, all right, Ethan. And I'm like, all right, stop playing around. Going in the ministry. And 2 months later, I moved down to New Orleans for seminary. That is an example of me being a doer of the word. After not being just a hearer. After just being a hearer. That is an example of me being a doer of the word. After not, I remember when early in my ministry career, I was having a tough time. I won't go into specifics. Early in my ministry career, I was having a tough time. I was going through a tough time. I won't go into specifics. And I remember calling. I was going through a tough time. I remember calling other people who were older than me, other pastors. I remember calling the pastor I grew up in. I grew up with Brother Michael at Bartlett Baptist Church, older than me. He's still there in Bartlett. I remember calling him. I remember calling my youth pastor. I remember calling. He's still there. Tons of people asking, "What do I do in this situation?" I remember calling. What do I do? Tons of people asking. I don't know what to do. This is my first position. What do I do? In ministry, full-time ministry. What do I do in this situation? First position. And it got to the point where I was miserable. What do I do in this situation? Going in
And it got to the point where I was
doing ministry at that
miserable.
time in my
What
life.
do I do in this going in?
But
And it got to the point where
it's one of the times where I grew closer to God than I ever have. But
and it got to the point where
because I could have easily, I could have easily done things that would have made my life easier. Because I could have easily, but every pastor I talked to said, Ethan,
made my life easier.
do not let this affect your quiet time. Don't let this affect your passion to ministry. Ethan,
made my life easier.
do not let make sure you're in prayer. Quiet time. Don't let this affect your passion to ministry. And I came out of that situation. Make sure you're in prayer. Quiet time. Don't let this affect your passion. And I was in between churches. I was a minister. I was a pastor of a church. So I just and I didn't know what to do.
I was a minister. I was a pastor.
And then got a pastor in Nashville named Jeff. And I didn't know what to do. Pastor of a big church in Nashville. Doesn't really know me from Adam, only that he knew my wife. He says, "Hey, how about you just come be an intern with us, and we'll pay you. We'll pay you absurd amount to be an intern, so you can pay your rent. Just come hang out with us
How
for
about you just
a
come be
year."
an intern with us, and we'll pay you.
That was
we'll pay you absurd
answer to a
amount to be an
prayer,
intern, so you can pay your rent.
Just come hang out with us.
Hey,
That was really God working in my life, and during those trials, I didn't know what would happen in my life. That was got the job. I got a job at Lifeway and all this kind of stuff. It was awesome. I didn't know what would happen. Lifeway and books and stuff. But got the job. I didn't know what I was going to do. And all this. But God answered a prayer.
I didn't know what would happen. Lifeway and books.
And I was able to endure that trial. It wasn't easy. I messed up along the way. I didn't do things perfectly. And I was able to endure that trial. It wasn't easy. But it's amazing when you do God's will. It's amazing what He will do at the other end of that. It's amazing when you're going through trials in your life and it's storming like it was storming earlier today. But you stay faithful to God through those trials. It's amazing what He can do in your life through you. You stay faithful to God through those trials. It's amazing. It's amazing what He can do in your life. Because I grew more personally in my faith through those trials. It's quickest during those times than I probably did at any other time. Because I grew more personally in my faith. So a doer endures trials, and I probably did it any other. And a hearer is drawn away by their desires. I mean, we're both guilty of that. I think we're sometimes guilty of that daily as Christians, drawn away by because we're these imperfect beings that we sin and we mess up. We're sometimes guilty of that. All right, so there's one more. There's one more being a doer to hear, and that's in verse 19. So, my dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, my dear brothers, slow to anger. Understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen. That is hard for me to speak, personally, of being slow to speak. I come to a family where that is hard for me. We speak loudly. Of being slow to speak. You can ask my wife. Come to a family where first time I brought my wife home to meet my father and brother and sisters and all that. First time I brought my wife home. She goes to me at the end of the day. Hey, why are y'all yelling at each other? She goes to me at the end of the day. She says, "Y'all keep on talking over each other. It gets louder and louder and louder." I was like, "No." I mean, Winfield, we're known for speaking a lot and sometimes maybe talking over each other, and that's just how we communicate. It took her a while to get used to that because she's like, "Y'all talk so loudly." And this is how you know that Ariel is the right woman for me. She's helped me because I would sometimes do that in regular life, not with family. Not even think about it because that's how I grew up, right? So I would maybe interrupt someone when I shouldn't interrupt them. Not even think about it. Or I would maybe interrupt too loud in a restaurant for no reason because and that's how you know she's the right woman for me because she was like, "Hey, Ethan, for no reason, she's okay with calling." And that's how you know she's the right woman for me because she was like, "Hey, you interrupted that person when they were okay with calling." And
that's how you know she's
really?
the right woman. Tell me because
No idea if I did that or not.
hey,
So she made me think more about when I speak to people.
really?
Made me think more when I speak to people.
So
So that's hard for me. That was nothing to do. That was free. So, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness.
So,
Therefore, ridding yourselves of all moral filth and evil. So, to be prevalent and humbly receive the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. A doer is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. Why is it important for us as Christians to be slow to speak? Quickness. Why is it important? Why do you think Christians to be slow to speak? Quickness. Why is it important? Why do you think Christians to be slow to speak? Quickness. Why is it important? Why do you think Christians to be slow to speak? Quickness. Yeah. Why is it important? Why do you think Christians to be slow to speak? Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, and this goes back to me in ministry. You know,
I think sometimes
when I was first when I first came into ministry, I thought I knew more than I really did. You know,
I think sometimes
when I was first, does that make sense? And that's probably every young person in every profession. But for me specifically,
does that make sense?
I remember I thought I had answers to things, but that I only knew the answers because I read about them. Does that make sense? To things, or I learned about them in a seminary class, or whatever I read about them. Does that make sense? So when someone comes to me, when a student comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with," so when someone comes to suicide, when a student comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm struggling," then for me, I'm a pretty analytical person. So I'm like, all right, in my mind, all right, student struggling with suicide. Here are all the solutions to help them not struggle with suicide. And I start blurting out, "Oh, how about you do this and this?" Student struggling with suicide. Here are all the solutions to help them not struggle with suicide. And I start blurting out, "Oh, how about you in that circumstance where that student comes to me and says, 'Hey, Ethan, I'm struggling with these suicidal thoughts.'" And I start blurting out, in that circumstance, is it at that moment, is it more important for me to listen, or is it more important for me to give an outline on why you shouldn't do suicide? Is it more important for me to listen? Or is it more important for me to give an outline on why? Those answers and not to do suicide can come later. They can come and they can come. Those
But at
answers
that
and
point,
not to do it's more important for me to listen later. They can come and they can come. I think that's a show of spiritual maturity that comes with just being a follower of Christ and being in those situations. I know you guys, a lot of you guys have been Christians a long time. You've probably been in similar, not suicide, maybe suicide. But situation where someone comes to you and maybe you think suicide, but you listen to them intently, and they situation where someone comes to you. Because you know, when I first started ministry, I thought I had all the answers. Listen to them intently, and I was really quick to speak. Now, sometimes I'm still quick to speak. And I'll still say, "Well, this is not right," and I don't know the story behind it. I'm still quick to speak. And I'll still say, "Well, this is." So that's why it's important. So a doer is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. And here is opposite. That's why it's important. So a doer is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to being a hearer and doer of the word is opposite. That's why it's important. It's important. A doer is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. It's important because if we're just hearers of the word, then what is the point? It's important because if we're just hearers, you know, that Lifeway did a study a couple years ago, right before COVID came out, and they asked students, that Lifeway did a study, actually not students, young people between the ages of like 22 and they asked students around my age who were actively involved in their churches when they were in youth, so when they were teenagers. Yeah, these are the kids. Now, these weren't like the passive kids who came once a month. They only asked this question to young adults who were there every week, like the regular attenders.
this question.
Who came to every Wednesday night, every Sunday morning with a mission trip
there
to
every
Kansas.
week. These regular attenders.
And
Came to every Wednesday night.
they asked him, "Are you still involved in a church?"
There every week. Regular attenders.
68% of them said
Came
no.
to every Wednesday night.
They asked him, "Are you still involved in a church?" These aren't the
There
kids that come once a month.
regular
These are the kids that are there all the
attenders.
time.
Came to every Wednesday night.
They asked him, 68% of them said no. These aren't the kids that come once a month, honestly. These are the kids that are there all the time. Now, 8% of them said no. Could a reason why that number is so high is because a lot of churches, now, a lot of churches didn't really take seriously because a lot of churches being a doer of the word. Yeah, a youth ministry can get kids in on a Wednesday night. I could play a game. I could play all these cool things. I could have cool events.
Get kids in on a
I can have cool events and
game.
do all these great things, and I could get 200 kids. I had one time did a dodgeball tournament when I was a youth pastor. I had 200 kids.
Do all these great things.
And we just played dodgeball.
And I could get 200 kids.
Way too many kids at this little gym. I thought it was going to be 100. I had 200 kids.
Do all these great things.
And we just played dodgeball.
And I could
But if all we do is play dodgeball, and then we might see a quick prayer at the end, or I might do a 1-minute devotion, and that's all those kids hear about Christ,
and then
or that's all the spiritual fulfillment they get is me doing a 1 or 2 minute devotion at the end of a dodgeball event, or that's all the spiritual fulfillment they get, and they're not being fed, and they're not being taught how to be doers of the word, not just hearers.
That's all the spiritual fulfillment they
What's going to happen to them when they go to college? And they are, for a lot of times, the first time in their lives, being introduced to worldviews and ideologies and other religions and other lifestyles that they've never seen before. But they've only been hearers
and ideologies and other
at
religions
their
and
church. They don't know how to handle.
But they've only been hearers.
That's one of the reasons why that's 68% at their church. They don't. And I'm thankful that we're at church here where Brother Stan and Brother Steve, that they're serious about us actually being the hands and feet of Christ. My mom told me the other day, you know, y'all's church does a lot of stuff. They're serious about us. Like y'all don't just sit around. My mom, y'all always doing something. Church does a lot of stuff. That's how it should be. Right? We should. And I said, yeah. I was like, you know, we can do a work day. We can say, hey, we can say, hey, we're gonna have a work day on Saturday, and I said, and we can say that on a Wednesday. We'll have like 40 people show up on Saturday. We can say, hey, we're gonna have a work day on Saturday. That's how we are. That's how it should be. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful. That I'm part of a church. That's how we are. I think you are too. That's how it should be. And I'm thankful. But it's always good to remind ourselves that we can slip into this being a hearer of the word sometimes, even because we can become complacent, and we can become comfortable because we can be in our spiritual walk. And being doers and hearers is different. Being a doer of the word is how we grow in faith. And being doers and hearers is really missing in the church today, not our church, little c. The wider church really missing. So many people want to be entertained. So many people want to feel good and not want to be challenged. So many people want to be entertained, and because of that, our culture seems like it's getting further and further away from truth, and because of that, I don't know what it's going towards. Insanity. Our culture seems like it's getting further and further away from truth. I know it's going towards insanity. I don't know what it's going towards. Insanity. So, being a doer of the word is how we change our community in our town. So, let me pray and then we'll close out. Thank you guys so much for letting me come on a rainy Wednesday night, fill in for Brother Stan. So big shoes to fill. Thank you guys so much. Father God, thank you for these men and women who braved the wind and the rain and the storms to come to a Wednesday night, God. And I pray that we know who we are, God, and that we know that we're supposed to be doers of your word. I pray that we're supposed to do things with our faith. We know that that does not save us. Those works don't save us. It doesn't get us into heaven. But we know that if we want to be fulfilled followers of yours, those works don't save us. It doesn't get us into heaven. But we know we're supposed to actually look like your followers to the outside. It doesn't get us into heaven. But we know we're supposed to. Now, I'm thankful that we are part of a church that's serious about that, God. But help remind us, because maybe not everyone who goes to our church is part of a church. I pray that people who come to our church or in our community or in our county, God, I pray that they see our church and they say, hey, there's something different about it. Or in our county, God, I pray they're actually doing things. See our church and they say, hey, there's something different. Help us continually be that church. And help us continually impact our community for the gospel. I pray these things in your name.